there's not a lot of money because of the way the structure is of the federation.
Has anybody come to you lately as an athlete with a concern that you have brought to Jim Mannion or Tyler or the IFBB? No. When was the last time someone did?
An actual complaint of somebody of wrongdoing or looking into something, it's got to be over 10 years. If anything, I'm an athlete's rep on the, what you want to call it, almost like an honorary position. I know Lee's not big on the 212 division. He thinks it's useless. I know. Go ask Flex Lewis if it's useless. Go ask Jose Raymond if it's useless. Go ask Guy Cisternino if it's useless. Dumbest things I've ever heard come out of Lee's mouth. And believe me, there's a long list of dumb things. So now you got to fly in pro judges, unless you have one in your area. All right.
And that's paid for by the promoters. That's not paid by the IFBB. The IFBB doesn't pay the judges. The promoters pay the judges.
You get two things when you get your sanction from the IFBB, Jack and shit.
All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Bodybuilding Breakdown. I'm joined today by a very special guest, the MC of the Mr. Olympia and countless IFBB Pro shows out there. The athlete's rep, the voice of bodybuilding, Bob Cicherillo. Bob, welcome.
What's up, brother?
This is it. How's life treating you?
Been very busy lately, as you know. So yeah, this week's
popular guy
all
lately.
off podcasts and Q&A, and but that's okay. Normally, I don't go on a whole lot of other shows. I traditionally have not, but every once in a while, you got to do a sweep, just to kind of put some answers to questions that are out there, and you let the inmates run the asylum, and this is what you end up getting is so much false information out there, and things that have just kind of been put out there in the bodybuilding universe that are either patently untrue, doesn't work like that, or again, just a complete mistruth. So I am here to clear up anything and everything you got, bro. So whatever you got, bring it on.
As always. No, I appreciate it. I actually saw, I watched John Livia's podcast. You were a deputy sheriff at one point?
Yeah, actually in upstate New York, Monroe County deputy sheriff. That was between 87, 88, 89, and then I got out. So I was only in 3 years.
Okay. No, I was a correctional officer myself for about a year myself.
Oh, really? Yeah. Interestingly, they about a year before that, 86, I got offered to be, for them to put me in the jail as a correctional officer, given my, size. I was bodybuilding back then, of course, but I didn't want no part of it, man. I had buddies that were already jail guards, and a lot of them told me the same thing, and you might even agree in hindsight. Now, they told me this is the only difference between you and the inmates is you get to go home at the end of the night. Other than that, you're behind the same bars, you're doing the same thing, and these are your coworkers.
No, I agree. I tell you, I had a guy that was doing our week-long orientation at the facility that I was working at, and he was nothing short of a hollow shell of a person, 30-year vet. And wow. If you could crack a smile out of the guy, you yeah. Like people, it would send waves through the whole institution. Like people like, this guy actually fucking smiled. It was seriously, it was like that. I'm glad that I got out when I did, looking back, because that's not the life that you want. Look, good experience. No. Glad I did it, but that's it.
I'm right with you.
Yeah. And so here I am now. But no, I wanted to talk about a couple of different things today. You wear, man, a lot of hats when it comes to the IFBB Pro League, when it comes to athletes rep, when it comes to MC, and I want to touch on a good number of them. But
sure.
I think I wanted to start with the athletes rep hat there.
Sure.
Yeah. So this all came to fruition where I was actually on John Livia's podcast here recently, and I just want to preface this to say, I have no interest in getting into the conversation about Phil Clayhart's placing here. I think that conversation's been, I think it's been over, and I think it's over and done with at this point. All the respect to Phil, great guy, but that's not where I want this conversation to go. One of the questions that I had for you, Bob, is surrounding not necessarily Phil himself, but the conversation that took place about Phil and your role as the athlete's rep. I think it's understandable to say that it can be construed as being the athlete's rep and commenting in such a manner could be kind of a conflict of interest when it comes to representing an athlete, because although you say that it didn't have many negative connotations, I felt that it really did, in that it was coming from more of a disrespectful tone. So how do you feel about that?
Well, number one of the burning questions, of course, all week has been, well, why didn't you reach out to Phil in confidence? Like, why didn't you call him privately, personally, whatever? And the bottom line is, he decided to go on a public platform, and from what I understand, there's a few different ones. I was unaware. The only one I caught that came across my desk was the one with Matt. That's the one I saw. So I didn't know he went on Ron Harris. I don't know if he was on your side. He was making the tour.
It wasn't on mine, and I didn't see Ron's.
Yeah, I didn't either, like I said, but this is what I found to be afterwards. That said, if you're going to go on a public platform and put it out there, well, I'm going to respond on a public platform. At that point, the cat was out of the bag, and I responded in kind. And listen, we've got a show also that I do with Sean, as everybody knows. And, while some people may have construed it as disrespectful, I didn't. I thought we gave him many accolades. I thought we were more than fair, in saying things that, listen, he's a good bodybuilder, or anything. Again, listen, he deserved this title. Just because I believe that a guy won a title because another guy was off doesn't mean I don't think he deserved it. I even said on our podcast, listen, I'm not going to take away his title. Phil did his job. He went there to compete and win a show, and that's what he did. It doesn't. So that's not disrespectful. But when you put out such accusations, and I think people they take this a little bit too lightly. You're talking about an athlete who went out on a public forum alleging that the vice president of the company, who was also the head judge at the show, conspired against him with the other judges. And I quote, right? These were quotes from Phil. They didn't want to look at me. They didn't even want I think they're just pushing the young guys, things like that. These are blatant accusations against the vice president and against the head judge and all the judging panel. That, again, there's conspiracy that this was set up in advance, that there was some other agenda here to get rid of him, as he says, and all that. And that's why I felt it was important to respond in kind. And when I say in kind, listen, I think in kind being on a public platform, we didn't call him names. We never called him one name. So when all those accusations came out that we called him all these names and things and this and that, listen, did we make light of it? Absolutely. How do you not make light of the fact that an athlete thinks that they're so important that the night before the judges got together at dinner and decided, hey, what do you want to do with Phil? Hey, what do you want to do with this guy? Hey, what do you think this guy should, they talk about these things. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Okay, to be completely honest, I don't play into the narrative of any conspiracy when it comes to anything that surrounded the Orlando Pro, whether it be Phil or otherwise. In this particular instance, I don't buy into that. But I do want to clarify. You mentioned Tyler and the IFBB specifically. Now, I've heard you say a number of times that you are not an employee of the IFBB. You do not represent the IFBB. So, but in this particular instance, it seems like you were defending the IFBB. Do you see how that could be construed as playing into the narrative? I think where you would be working for the best interest of the IFBB rather than the athlete.
Well, here's the deal, Kenson. It depends on how you look at it, right? And let me qualify that with a fuller answer to that. Yes, it can be construed that I'm defending the faith. Now, in one aspect, I am defending them. Okay, I'm defending the judges and Tyler in particular, since he called out Tyler by name, because I know that's simply not true. Okay, these things don't happen. They don't conspire against athletes. They don't talk about getting rid of somebody. That's just nonsense. Okay, you know it. I know it. Everybody knows it except for the person in question. That said, what I am defending, okay, because I do represent the athletes, but I represent the athletes in whole, as an entity, okay, as a group. It's my responsibility to make sure the other 1,000 athletes, just making up a number, understand and know that this is bullshit, that this is not what the judges do, that they do not conspire against athletes. They don't take your past considerations, your past accomplishments, I should say, in consideration when you step on stage, and they didn't. And that's so my job, if you look at it from my perspective, is not to protect the single, in any respect. And I don't agree with anything he said. I thought it was complete garbage. I thought it was nonsense. I think he was speaking out of emotion. I don't think he was thinking logically. But I have to look out for all the other athletes in this business who are going to hear that and go, wait a minute. So I don't know. Is that what they do? Or, geez, did they really listen? I'm 43 years old. So is that going to be a problem for me now going forward? So you can kind of see where there's two different ways to look at this.
Okay. When you put it in that context of looking out for the rest of the athletes, that's a little bit more understandable. To me, it didn't come off that way when you were speaking with Sean Ray. But that, again, that's my opinion. That's how I felt about it.
That's cool.
Felt like you put it out a different way. This is somewhere we can come and we can have those conversations. And
sure, absolutely.
Not get all butthurt about it, which is great. Now, the other question that I had for you was putting the Orlando Pro aside, putting all that aside. I've actually been following your channel for quite some time. You started regularly posting there.
Appreciate that, bro.
Oh, well, it's good content. When it comes to some of the things that you've said, I don't necessarily agree with all, and you've got many that don't, which is fine, right? That's why we have these forums in order to put our opinions out there, as we've said many times. But one of the things that I really wanted to have a conversation with you about is I've heard you say a number of times that nobody cares about the journey of these bodybuilders. And there's a reason why I wanted to bring this up. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a different perspective of what you may hear, from other outlets here or other individuals. For myself, I started covering this sport in November of 2022 regularly here on my YouTube channel. It was about 8 weeks before the Olympia, and I think that I gained some traction fairly quickly. I needed an outlet myself when it came to bodybuilding, and that's what brought me to this in particular. And where I started following your channel, I said, well, this is something where I might be able to have, some further conversation with individuals like yourself, other bodybuilders, other YouTubers. And I've done that since. It's been great. But when it comes to the journey of bodybuilders, I know that you've said many times that nobody cares when it comes to stepping on that stage. And I don't think anybody would disagree with you on that point. But the one thing that I did want to maybe further explain a different perspective to you on was when it comes to the journey of bodybuilding, there are many, many fans of bodybuilding and other athletes for that matter that really do care about the journey. They want to know how these guys click. They want to know how they got to where they got to. They want to know about the workouts. They want to know about the struggles. They want to know about the trials.
Sure.
Exactly. So I just wanted you to hear it from me that when it comes to the journey, a lot of times when people mention the journey, that's what they're talking about. Not necessarily it affecting it on stage, but people really do care about the journey of these guys, man. I've talked to them. I've interested, and so have you.
Sure. Yeah, listen.
I just wanted to offer that perspective.
No, listen, and that's a great topic to bring up. Appreciate that. The context comes from a long time ago of an article I wrote, Flex Muscle Development on one of the magazines back then. But it's centered around the fact that it was more about, not when I say people or no one, the context is more about the judges. Okay. It's more in the context of the judges could give a shit about your journey. They don't care where you came from. They don't care how you got there. They don't care what obstacles you had to overcome to get on stage. Right. And it was all about the perspective of the people watching the show. Actually, the article was titled Vantage Point. And it was I thought it was a really good article that kind of exposed the show from 10 different people's perspective, kind of like the car accident scene, right? Where they go to witnesses and there's 10 different versions of what happened, even though we all know there's only one version of what happened. But you have a vantage point. I have a vantage point. The guy in the second row has a vantage point. The judges have a vantage point. And the point was that like the girlfriend gets pissed off, or the wife, because she's got her heart involved, right? She's invested in this thing. And so to her, it's like, well, if you only knew what he had to overcome to get onto this state, right? So she's looking at it from a whole different perspective and a different vantage point. And my point was to expound on that was that the judges don't care about your journey. Okay. They don't. And this kind of filters in, not to bring it up, but I got to. This filters in with the subject at hand that we just talked about this past week. In this case is with Phil. And I'm not even picking on him at this point. I'm saying this could be anybody because I've heard this numerous times. They don't care about what you did last year. They don't care about how you did at the Olympia. They don't care again, what company you're with, who you're signed with, who your trainer is. But again, past accomplishments, as I try to point this out to Matt, who wasn't quite getting it, should never be taken into consideration on a bodybuilding stage. You should be judged on the merit of what you present on that stage and that stage only. That's it. So I'll always defend that, and I hope the judges always do that, and they always should. And then that kind of evolved into just an observation out of over the years that I've never heard the winner talk about their journey. Like I've never heard an interview after a show where they come up and they say, "Hey, Kenson, congratulations, bro, and nice job. And you are the Tampa Pro champion. You're going to your first Olympia." And your answer would be, "Well, Bob, hey, I appreciate that, but for me, it's not about this victory here tonight or the $50,000 I just won. For me, it's all about the journey and the friends I've made along the way and all these type of things." I've never heard that from the winner. I've only heard that from people who have lost a show or people way down in the back of the pack that becomes the goal is to enjoy the journey. It's like, maybe I'm old school and I know I am, but to me, it was never about the journey. The journey was just part of what got you. It was the destination was everything. I went into a competition to win the goddamn show. That's the whole point. I went in there was to prove I was the best, win the title, get the paycheck, or again, whatever, amateur, pro, whatever. That was the whole goal. The journey just happens along the way.
I understand where you're coming from, because I know that there's a lot of guys with that what you would call old school attitude when it comes to, I don't give a shit about the journey. It's the end result that matters. And these days, Correct. You're right. There's a lot of talk out there about how the journey is just as important as the destination. And I think that can be a coping mechanism for being able to get through portions of that journey that are hard. And that's fine if that's what you need to do. But, I got to say, there are a lot of athletes that do get up, and I'm sure that you've interviewed as they won the show, where they do speak about how hard it was to get to this point, right? So I don't think it's maybe necessarily as uncommon as maybe you're considering, because Chris Bumstead, Derek Lunsford, I've heard it from all these guys. They get up on stage, they give their speech at the end, and usually there's some sort of thing about how difficult it was. Now, after the fact, you've already won, so that doesn't have a bearing in particular on the outcome like you're mentioning.
And but, also, like I said, let's not forget, they're very emotional at that point. You literally just won the show. I don't care whether it's the Olympia or right. So you're speaking out of emotion. You got this flood of emotions, and you're thinking about those who, backed you up. Your wife was right there with you the whole time. Your training partner was right, that type of thing. So I get that. And listen, don't think I don't, listen, I've enjoyed every journey that I've had. And I've had many of them over these years, and these are fond memories, and you do meet a lot of people. Again, my point in that whole point in that making that point was that it's become a default over the years of enjoying the journey. Well, it's not about the destination. No, it was very much about the destination for me. I wanted to get to the Olympia.
Yeah. And you can enjoy the journey without necessarily getting to the end result that you're looking at. But now we're just getting too philosophical. So like I said, I just wanted to put that out there there are so many that do care about the result is a result on stage. But the journey, certainly important to many.
Enjoy your journey. I'd enjoy the first place much better.
I'm sure there's many that would agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Now, the athlete's rep position.
Sure.
I've heard you speak about it on many, many occasions here. This is something where you were appointed as the athlete's rep by Jim Mannion 20 plus years ago. Okay. Well,
let me just clarify that before you move on.
Sure.
Sean, as everybody knows, I don't want to rehash the whole thing. Sean was actually voted on by the athletes as per Wayne DeMilia, who was in charge at that point, as per his request. So he had to go out and get, I don't know, some ridiculous 110 signatures from athletes and all this. Okay, great. He did it.
Okay. He
got put in place. He didn't last too long. All right. It was a couple of months, like literally. And Sean was like, all right, I'm out of here. I don't see this going anywhere, this and that. I was going to step in because it was basically my idea to have an athlete's rep, as I had tried to start a union, which we can get into that stuff a little after if you want, for the athletes, which would have been a really good move way back then. But it didn't go. Again, that's a whole nother story. So the next best thing we could do was at least have a seat at the table. That's why we got Sean in there. Sean abdicated the throne. I was obviously going to step in as we were the two that put this thing together. Jim said, well, look, let's post it up. They posted the job, so to say. It's like posting a job at the workplace on the wall. And they put out an email, to see if nobody else wanted the job. Literally nobody else wanted it. Nobody put in to be the athlete's rep except for me. So Jim appointed me into the position. So just to clarify how that took place.
Okay. And that was the last vote that took place, was over 20 years ago, and you've been there since?
I have been there ever since. Yeah, I have routinely, if anybody's seen any of my interviews over the years, be it through Flex Magazine, any of the media sources, any of my own shows, Pro Bodybuilding Weekly, The Last Rep, now with, the Voice of Bodybuilding, the VOB, I have routinely offered for anybody that wants to the job, basically, to come and go for it. Listen, right into Jim Mannion, tell them you want to be the athlete's rep, and listen, you serve it at their behest. All right. I don't think Jim would actually have you go out there and get all these athletes' votes, but maybe they would. I don't know. But I've served in the capacity for 20 plus years now, whatever that number is. I don't know. I think I've done a pretty good job. There's a lot of things I've done, some of the blowback, I've seen, like from Matt and Lee, he should go out there and tell people what he's done and this and that. That's not me, okay? As much people think I have this big giant ego, I really don't. I don't put it out there. And if I did put it out there, and again, you've said yourself, you've seen my stuff for years, for sure. If I went out there bragging on myself all the time, oh, there he goes again. There he goes bragging on himself. So I guess it's all about Bob, right? Without him, we wouldn't have this. Without him, we wouldn't. So I've never put that stuff out there. I've quietly worked behind the scenes on the athlete's behalf, putting things in like different divisions for them to compete in, and which ultimately is left. I know Lee's not big on the 212 division. He thinks it's useless. I know. Go ask Flex Lewis if it's useless. Go ask Jose Raymond if it's useless. Go ask Guy Cisternino if it's useless. These are people like Guy, with all due respect to Guy, who I like very much. He would have had no career as a pro. And we've had this conversation ourselves. He thanked me up and down. I'm glad this division exists because, listen, I would have turned pro. I don't think I would have done anything against these big monsters, and my career would have been finished. So it's the domino effect, and giving people an opportunity. Like they use the example, which I thought this was bizarre, but, some of those top guys now are 212 guys. No, there's no top guy right now that's the 212 guy. Well, you got Hadi Chupan and Derek Lunsford. They're both 212. They were 212 years ago. None of those guys are 212, right? Flex Lewis was 212, right? Last time he competed, and he hung up the trunk. And he could have gone to the Open if he wanted to, right? But I don't know. I think he played it smart and being a 7-time Olympia champion. But born out of that are not just the titles, it's the contracts, company endorsements, guest appearances, seminars, again, all these things, selling your merchandise. This has opened the door for many, many athletes. And I'm just using the 212 as an example. So I'm going to vehemently disagree with Lee, Matt, I think, whoever else that's come out and said, well, the 212 is useless. No, it's a stepping stone. Okay. For these athletes that can come in, and if that's where they belong, great, they can stay there. If they want to move up like Hadi or Derek or any of these guys, good for you. Listen, it's there for you to use it at your best, that if you can be the champion or you can move on. Hadi and Derek, those guys aren't anywhere near 212 anymore. And I'm using 212. There's also a bikini division that exists out of my proposal many, many years ago. There's also a women's physique that exists out of my proposal many, many years ago. So this has opened up avenues for, go ask, Sarah, our current Olympia champ in women's physique, if she likes the division or if she thinks it's, has any value to it, or Natalia Coelho, or any of your bikini champs over the years. So these are just a smattering of things that I've brought to the table, but this has put huge dollars not in everybody's pocket. The league, the promoters, the people that do shows, the athletes. I don't know. I thought, I think that's decent work.
You mentioned Matt and Lee, and I've got a couple of clips from the recent interview that Lee did with Matt there, which we'll get into in a bit.
Oh, great.
I think that I know you're going to enjoy that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that more so, not necessarily, people don't want to know that you're being boastful. And perhaps Matt and Lee were saying more so that athletes and individuals would like to know, who is the athlete's rep? What did he do in order to become the athlete's rep? They want to know that you have that ability, reputation, and there's nothing wrong with saying the things that you've done and giving yourself more credibility toward being the athlete's rep. Because otherwise, how would new athletes even know? Like, who is why is this guy the athlete's rep? It's like,
and keep in mind, we have thousands of new athletes over the course of 20 years. So listen, I'm going to keep things real here. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of them that don't know that I'm the athlete's rep, or they can come to me. In the old days with the magazines, which weren't that old, but it was routinely out. I mean, I had articles, I had things in the magazines that would refer to me constantly as the athlete's rep. We had meetings back in the day. We don't have, a lot has changed in the landscape. We don't have an annual meeting anymore. In the old days, we used to have an annual meeting at the Olympia that would take place.
Yes.
And we would literally sit at the big conference table with all these representatives, and the other divisions had representatives at that point. All the other divisions had their own rep. I was kind of the main one, but there was other ones. And we would put in proposals of what we thought, or, we would bring things to the table that we thought either needed to be looked at, needed to be changed, whatever. So that fell apart. Well, I shouldn't say fell apart. They kind of disbanded it at some point because it didn't make any sense to have to wait for a whole year. Like, if I had a good idea and I said, "Hey, Jim, what do you think about doing this?" And he says, "Okay, yeah, let's take a look." Well, there's no reason to wait until after, 8 months to implement it. Let's just implement it. So that's what we started doing, which then rendered the meeting kind of, okay, we really don't need this formal, let's take the minutes. We would do roll call. I mean, it was a very formal type thing back then. So that's what kind of got rid of the meeting, which kind of got rid of the positions, so to say. If anything, I'm an athlete's rep on the what you want to call it, almost like an honorary position, because we don't have official meetings or any of that type of things. So that's fine. Listen, I still put in proposals. I still put in ideas. And I have routinely told people along the way, feel free to contact the office. It's the same place that you go to get your pro card every year. It's the same address that you send your dues in. It's the same address that when you want to go into a show, you get your contract from. You have direct access to the IFBB Pro League. So go for it. You don't have to go through me. You can hate my guts or think I'm the biggest douchebag in the world. Great. Don't go. You don't have to use me. Go. You got a direct access to the home office.
It sounds like the framework for not just an athlete's rep, but a sort of committee which represented all the divisions used to exist and now does not. When I think it would probably be more beneficial, I'm actually positive it would be more beneficial these days because there are more athletes that exist. I know you threw out numbers of 700, 748, whatever it was. There could be 1,000. There could be over 1,000 athletes.
Yeah, it's
you don't know, even as the athlete. You don't even know as the athlete's rep, correct?
Yeah, I don't even. I'm not privy to these. I mean, I could find out if they have some use to it, but I mean, they come and they go. There's a difference between there's active pros and there's inactive pros. There's pros that obviously they renew their card every year, but they don't compete. There's athletes that don't renew their card, but they are considered pros, of course. Right. And then there's pros that are actively competing as pros. So there's lots of different numbers that you could pull from of active, inactive, and former.
Right. And that's something that I think would need to be clarified, I think, as to who would have any kind of say. I would imagine you would have to be an active pro. And I know that the conversation has been there of what is active and what is inactive. Have you competed in a year? Have you competed in the last 2? Those are other conversations to have. Now, here's one question. Has anybody come to you lately? You don't have to say who or what it was, but has anybody come to you? Has anybody come to you lately as an athlete with a concern that you have brought to Jim Mannion or Tyler or the IFBB? No. When was the last time someone did?
I haven't hit literally. I can't remember the last time somebody came to me with a actual. The last time we had anything of that nature was when we split from the other IFBB, the Raphael, elite thing like that some years ago. And then I was actively involved in recruiting athletes that should have gotten their pro cards overseas and didn't for whatever reason. A lot of corruption, a lot of politics, a lot of everything. Don't need to get into that. But there was people that won pro qualifiers and they just wouldn't give them their pro card, or they were jacking them up for 10 grand or 15 grand to give them their pro card. So there was a lot of stuff that went on around that time. So I was very involved and very active in getting these athletes their rightful pro cards, getting them over to the pro league. Now that's not, I know that's along the lines of what you're asking, but an actual complaint of somebody of wrongdoing or looking into something, it's got to be over 10 years. And listen, 10 years ago when we did have magazines, and there was a lot less pros and things like that. And numbers wise, I'm sure a lot more pros did know I was the athlete's rep at that point. Even then, I would routinely put things out, asking people if they had anything to bring to the table. To be honest with you, I'm the only one that was bringing any proposals to the table at these official meetings. Nobody would bring in nothing, at least nothing of any consequence. Like we would get, a ludicrous thing here and there from somebody in some other division that they wanted to look at, but it was nonsense for the most part. But again, we serve the IFBB. This is not the NFL. This is not PGA golf, which we actually more closely resemble than any other sport, if you want to look at it in those such terms. We're not basketball. We don't have mainstream money. They don't even have to entertain an athlete's rep. If Jim Mannion called me tomorrow and says, you know what, we're just going to get rid of this whole thing, this athlete's rep thing. Okay, listen, what's the recourse? I've asked this for years. In order to have any type of power of the people, like we talked about the union talk or an association or anything like that, you have to have an or what threat. Meaning, you're going to go and hold up a promoter and go, hey, man, unless we get $500,000, we're not competing. And he goes, all right, well, you ain't getting $500,000, right? You're not the move. It's your move, right? If you think for 1 second, you can get everybody to band together collectively for the greater good of the establishment. I'm here to tell you, okay, again, I tried it 20 something years ago with a union. I put out 100 and something email. I got 110 emails back saying, yeah, you're right, man. Let's go. We need to do this. This is good for the, and you know exactly where this story went without you even knowing where it went. 22 guys showed up at this meeting. And that was it. The rest of them were either scared for themselves, didn't want to get blackballed, right, or put themselves on a chopping block. The guys who were making money weren't going to upset the apple cart, right, because they're making money. Hey, man, listen, everybody can fare for themselves. What do I give a shit? If that guy ain't making money, well, do better. Beat me, right? It's a competition. The guys in the middle, let's just break it into tens. The top 10 ain't doing nothing. They're making money. They got contracts. They're doing great. They're making a living from the sport of bodybuilding. The next 10 are next in line. Hey, man, I'll be there in a couple of years. Yeah, I'm almost there. I just took 5th in my last show, right? They're the next group that's going to be making money and getting a big contract and a title, getting to the Olympia stage. And the bottom 10 ain't making anything anyways. So the only people that were really interested was the bottom 10. And that was the bottom line. And listen, I put my ass on the line. That's one thing I did do back then. And listen, I wasn't the rep. There was no rep at that point. I was just a new guy coming in, looking at things going, this is bullshit. These guys
did it come down to money? Is that what it came down to? Was just money, not unfair treatment or anything like that? It all came down to money?
No, listen, there are politics. They took something I said out of context earlier in their Matt and Lisa. I've never said there's been no politics in this game. There was a lot of politics back in the day, which I have routinely mentioned. When you get back into the magazine war days of Weider versus Bob Hoffman versus NABA, WABA, all that kind of stuff, there was a huge amount of politics that went on back then. Anybody could just go get the tape of the 81 Olympia to see that. I mean, come on, that was the biggest travesty anybody's ever seen in this earth, was Franco winning 81. I mean, I don't think anybody would dispute that, right? But those days were a long time ago. All that stuff kind of went away with after years and years. Once Weider established himself, once things progressed, it's been no secret that listen, the IFBB has no competition. Nobody's even close. Nobody's ever come close, ever. Nobody. So they work within themselves. No, the problem, to answer your question, wasn't money. It was that the athletes were scared to put their name on the line, to stand up for their, quote, fellow athlete, which ultimately would have helped them. It's a very selfish sport. Everybody's looking out for their own good. If we took the Olympia this year, in the top 4 guys, let's just take the top 3. Okay, let's take Derek, Hadi, and Samson. And they went to Jake Wood and they went, you know what? This should be a $2 million purse. And if it's not, we ain't competing. Do you
So
think
it does come down to money then?
well, that's a big part of it, of course, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Do you
Okay.
think under any circumstances, and they go on your podcast, right? And they go, we're making this announcement right now. If this ain't up to $2 million, we're all sitting out. Do you think Nick Walker is going to sit out? Right?
Okay.
I mean, think about this now, right? The top three guys just says, you know what? Screw it. We're out. We're going to demand this money. Do you think Nick Walker is going to sit out the Olympia when he's literally a shoe-in to be Mr. Olympia? Do you think Brandon Curry's going to sit out? You think somebody else ain't sitting there going, wait a minute, that's $400,000 in my pocket. That's $150,000. Do you think Andrew Jack's going to, power to the people? No.
Well, athletes have been historically underpaid when it comes to even first place at these shows.
Oh, bro.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I know that you've talked about championing, money to be able to get athletes paid in the past and things like that. I don't necessarily know what Nick or Samson or Andrew would say about that if it would affect their paychecks, because in that day and age of bodybuilding, perhaps so. In this day and age of bodybuilding, with social media, with the contracts that these guys do have, the sponsors, things like that.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily so sure. I think that a lot of the conversation around this is from 20 years ago. I think that, and it's certainly true, the game has changed drastically.
Huge.
There are more athletes now. There are more opportunity for income. I'm sure that the IFBB is worth more money than it is now.
Oh, listen, exponentially. That's not even a question. And you're 100% correct. It has changed drastically and especially for somebody who's been there for all these years involved. No, there's not enough money. But the problem is we're also not a mainstream sport or entity or whatever you want to call it. We don't have that kind of money coming in. When you talk about the money trail, it's got everything to do with everything in that context. Okay, why? People ask all the time, why aren't we on ESPN? They got all these channels out there. I'm watching the stupid hot dog, guys eating 25 hot dogs, in 2 minutes. Somehow that's on TV and we're not. And it all comes down to revenue. Okay. Listen, I've got full tapes of myself in the Nationals, the North Americans, the USA back in the late 80s, where we had full coverage on ESPN, prime time coverage they'd send out a crew and do they were there for a whole day at my house doing this whole little interview thing where you're walking around the house and you're talking about your career, and all that stuff. And then boom, they play it. And then you come on, you do your routine. This was fantastic coverage back then. And people say, well, what happened? Oh, it was the steroids. It was the steroids. No, it wasn't the steroids. It was the lack of interest. We don't have those kind of numbers, okay? When you take the Super Bowl of bodybuilding, the Olympia, and you put a number to and you say, at best, because I've been on stage at the biggest ones we've ever had, we had 10,000 people at the Orleans Arena. Well, that sounds pretty damn impressive. That's the Monday Night Raw taping and a bum shit Tennessee will put 16,000 people in on a Monday Night Raw. That's just a regular house show. You know what I mean? That's not their Super Bowl. That's not WrestleMania. We're not even on the map when it comes to those type of numbers or mainstream, and that trickles to the pay-per-views, right? We don't sell those kind of pay-per-view numbers to make, millions of dollars, like UFC does, that type of stuff. There's not a lot of money because of the way the structure is of the federation. For instance, who puts on NFL games? The NFL.
I don't.
Right?
Okay, sure, yeah.
Right? I mean, right? Who puts on baseball games, right? Major League Baseball. Who puts on basketball games? The NBA. Who puts on bodybuilding shows? Not the IFBB. Not the IFBB. The IFBB has never promoted a show.
The IFBB is the sanctioning body.
Correct, sir. The IFBB is only a sanctioning body. So when people point the finger to them, it goes, oh, well, okay, wait a minute now. So where's the money? Well, individual promoters put it on. Do you imagine the football game that just came on last night being brought to you by Joe Smith, the promoter? You know what I mean? It's like, well, no, obviously there's big money involved here. It's the NFL. It's, there's people buying time, for commercials and networks and things. It's big time business, right? No, they don't have individual promoters that puts on, major sporting events. We have individual promoters. So now it's just left on their shoulders. And they have to raise the money to get to these athletes. Listen, I've been bitching about prize money ever since I get in the league. I was bitching about $10,000 purses back in 25 years ago. And the problem is only now are we starting to bump up some of these. Most of the problem is if you're an athlete and you're willing to show up and compete for nothing, for peanuts, then why would anybody increase it?
Right. You know, you mentioned the PGA, and I know I don't know a ton about golf, but what I do know is even the guy that shows up in last place makes a couple of bucks, you know?
Yeah, they do. Now, but again, it's a mainstream sport. Here's the difference. PGA is watched by more people than anybody at anything, right? On TV.
These promoters aren't broke. These promoters are making, they must make enough money in order for if there's enough money for them to increase prize money from 10,000 to 30,000, like we saw at the Texas Pro, it's not there. Let
me explain it, brother. I've been a promoter. I put on numerous shows in my day. Okay, like you say, one of those hats you were talking about, right? Sure. I can assure you that promoters do not make big money. The only money you make as a promoter is in the NPC. That's a fact. Okay, if you got 400 people, 500 people, athletes paying you, you can do the math. 400 athletes at $1.25 per division that they enter. Some of them enter 3, 4, 5 divisions these days. All right. Plus sponsorships, plus ticket sales. Okay. You can make some good money if you got a big NPC show. It costs you need about 100 athletes, between 100 and 150. There's obviously a lot of different details. You need about 100 to 150 to break even. Okay. To pay for the venue, pay for the awards, pay for the help, pay for the MC. Thank God. Pay for your backstage help, right? Everything, right? You got to pay for everything. The lights, the pipe and drape, the on and on and on and on. There's a lot of expenses when it comes to a competition. You need between 100 and 150 just to break even. Okay. That means if you got a show with 150 people, it looks okay. And you go, wow, there's a lot of people here, right? You might just be breaking even, right? However, pros don't sell tickets. Okay. Very difficult. We don't have those kind of numbers. We never have. When you go, and we separated this out, I worked with Ed and Betty Pariso for many years at the Europas, now the USA Fit Games. One time we actually separated the tickets out. And I said, we got to see who's buying what here, who's here for the NPC, because we sold one ticket, so you can never tell who was there for what. We sold 9 tickets for the pro division that year, for whatever pro stuff we had on stage. 9. If you have a couple of locals, let's just say you're in Orlando, right? If you got 2 or 3 pros that live in Orlando, they might bring mom, dad, sis, and bro to come see them in their pro debut or, competing. But if they're from out of town, they ain't bringing nobody. They're bringing nobody at that point. By the time you get to the pro level, and every pro will tell you this, mom, dad, sis, bro, and uncle junior, they kind of tapped out, bro. They're not getting on a plane now to go to Indiana to watch you compete. Hey, man, let us know how you did. We'll catch you at the pay-per-view if there is one, right? They don't sell any tickets. None. So the problem is there's no revenue coming in. If you're a promoter and you want to put on a show, you want to put the EPzeronine championships, and you go to Jim Mannion and you say, hey, I want to put a show on, right? And he goes, okay, I'll give you a sanction, right? Sanctions, I don't know, $6,000. Okay. Now you've got the ability to put on a show. And you're going to put this pro division, you're going to put 4 pro divisions in there, okay? 2 men's and 2 women's. Okay. So you pay your sanction fee. All right. 6, 12, maybe you got 15,000 in sanction fee money. So you're down 15 grand. Now you got to come up with prize money. Now, let's just say for the sake of conversation, you're only doing the base min. Like you're doing 3,000, what we call 3, 2, 1, 3,000, 2,000, 1,000 for second and third. Okay. That's 6,000 each division, 6, 12, 18. So now you got 24,000 and 15,000. Okay. So you were already in, what is it, 24, 34, whatever it is, right? $35,000 right, thereof, right? You haven't bought an award. Oh, wait a minute. It's a pro show, bro. You need pro judges now. You can't use the NPC judges. So now you got to fly in pro judges unless you have one in your area. All right.
And that's paid for by the promoters. That's not paid by the IFBB. The IFBB doesn't pay the judges. The promoters pay the judges.
You get 2 things when you get your sanctions from the IFBB, jack and shit. That's what you get. You get the ability. To put on the show. You get the sanction, which means they sanction the event under the house of the IFBB Pro League. You don't get a pencil. You don't get a piece of paper. You don't get nothing. The promoter pays, and that's just the way it's structured. Okay, you're already in. Again, whatever my math is correct here, right? The $24,000 and $14,000, 20 or 34, $35,000. You haven't flown in a judge. You haven't put them up in the hotel. You haven't paid your workers. You haven't rented the venue. You haven't paid the lighting guys, the DJ, the MC, the security people that you got to have. If you're at a union hall, forget about it. Forget about it. I got my ass handed to me at a union hall before because you got minimums and all that stuff. I had to have 8 security people for no good reason, right? You got to have the EMTs there. You got to have this there. You got to, bro, by the time you're done, right, you're into this thing over your head for, I don't know, let's just make up a number. You're already at 35,000. Let's add another 20 for everything I just said, which is really minimizing it, but right. You're in for over 50,000, you're almost $60,000 and you haven't sold one ticket yet. And you're not going to sell any tickets for the reasons I just told you. So you tell me where the promoter's making money. Now,
when you say that,
just to further that, and we can move on.
Okay.
Let's just say you had a good NPC show, right? Like you killed it. Man, you got 300 athletes at your end. Remember I told you, you need 100, 125 or so, give or take, to pay the bills, right? You got 300 people, so you made some money. But guess what? Every dime let's just say you made $25,000 in profit selling tickets and NPC stuff, right? Oh, wait a minute. So 25,000, I got to pay all the pro stuff. What was the pro stuff? 55,000? You just lost $30,000. So there you go. So when everybody brings up this notion that these greedy promoters, every time I hear that, I'm like, oh my God, like they have no clue how this stuff works. Most promoters, well, not even most, none of these pro promoters make money on pro shows. You only make your money on the NPC stuff if you're lucky. So no, there's not a lot of other money. And then you say, well, get it from sponsors. Well, you can only dig so much to the same sponsors over and over and over, and they have to have a return. If you're not bringing in massive amounts of people, why am I going to give you $5,000, set up a booth and sit there and twiddle my thumbs for no business? It's tumbleweed blowing through there. So you can see where there's a lot more to it and a lot of problems when it comes to, this is why the sport is where it is. We don't have corporate sponsorship. We don't have Mercedes-Benz taking commercial time. We don't have Budweiser or a beer company or Red Bull, or we don't have anybody mainstream because we're not mainstream.
And it's never going to be mainstream. Arnold tried that back in the day, and I think was quite successful for his time. But these days, no, you won't see it on ESPN. I don't think you necessarily need to be on ESPN for athletes to make the amount that. I guess what I can say is that the athletes have found a way in order to monetize themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to the overarching question of all of this is the way that the organization is set up. You referenced the NHL, the NFL. Well, if this is the way that it's set up and that is what's really holding things back, wouldn't the logical choice be to restructure the organization so that they are more accountable to the athletes? They are they're the company that needs to provide for these athletes. They're the ones that pay them. They're the ones that need to do the majority of the promotion and take it off of the promoter. Wouldn't that be the answer?
No, because it depends on which side of the fence you're on, right? If you're the company, listen, they make their money. It's structured as such, and that's just the way it's always been. It's, again, you're working at their behest, okay? It's these athletes. Why would they change anything when you've got thousands and thousands of athletes who choose to come compete on your stage? You come and choose to compete as an amateur, and you pay, right? You pay an entry fee. You pay to get ready. Your family pays the tickets. You go there and you get your trophy or your medal or whatever it is, or you're there for your journey, or whatever your thing is, right? Mm-hmm. And okay, well they're amateurs. They're amateurs. Okay, well now you're a pro, and like I said, unless you're crafty or you're really really good, listen. Don't get me wrong. There are some people, some athletes that are making a shitload of money at this game. Now they're not a lot of them. Okay, there might be 10. In the world of, and I'm talking men's open. I'm not including all the other ones. Yes, there are some people that do okay, but let's just stick with the guys, because that's what we do. There might be 10 making a living, and and listen, they're making good money. Listen, who am I thinking of? Derek or Hottie, right? Samson,
Sure.
there he competed a few times last year. Right? Listen, these guys made a good buck. Derek made 400,000 at the Olympia. I don't know what endorsements he has, but let's just say it's another 200,000. Right? That's 600.
He's got
right?
a few. He's got a few. Yeah,
He's got a few, right? I mean, I
He's
wouldn't be
monetized himself.
well, and then you've got social media, which is the best and the worst thing that's ever happened to this game for various reasons, right? He might be jacking. Let's just say he's making $1 million a year. All right. Chris Bumstead's making way more than that just on social media stuff because he does. Listen, he makes 50 grand at the Olympia. And I asked him before, I said, why do you know, like Sean always says, why don't you go to the Open? It's $400,000. And he said, I don't need the money. I'm not doing this for money.
Money? No, he's
No,
Chris Bumstead. Of course not.
but he said, I'm not doing this for that. That was merely a catalyst for me, to bring it, bring his platform to the world, right? Well, competing for 50,000 has made him 500,000. Again, whatever. I'm just making up numbers, right? But
Right.
that's where bodybuilding at the pro level is an opportunity. It's a platform. Okay. They give you the ability and the platform to step on that stage and make something of yourself. This has always been the way it's been. There's those who make something out of themselves, like Arnold and Lou and Lee Haney and Rich Gaspari and Labrada and this one and that one. And listen, not that I'm in their category, but people like to harp on me and Sean. Well, guess what we still do 40 years into this game? We make a living. And I'll say I've made a damn good living, not having a real job in some time here, right? Covering this bodybuilding world and my various MC duties and things and stuff, right? And we still sign contracts to this day. One guy, John was laughing at me. John was kind of, laughing, just busting my balls. He's like, how do I get the sponsors like you got? And, he's like, kind of joking with me. I said, bro, I've been around for a long time. I bring a lot to the table when it comes to interest in my platform or whatever. But this is a stepping stone to use as a catalyst to get somewhere else. It was never intended for people to make a living on, really. It just wasn't. It was intended to furnish the magazines with enough content so that Joe Weider could make a good living. That's what it was intended on doing. And they gave the athletes crumbs, really. You know what I mean? But to them, they wanted to make their way. They wanted to be Mr. Olympia. I'm going to make it big in movies, whatever.
The game has changed. The game has changed drastically. I really feel that any athlete that gets their pro guard and competes consistently should have the opportunity to make that their core income stream. Now, with that being said, I absolutely do think that it does come down to individuals. Nobody should be handed anything. Nobody handed me anything. And I can relate.
Keep in mind, not to cut you off, but also keep in mind that we're in a performance-based. I don't know. I hate to use the word sport because we're really not a sport per se. We're halfway between art and sport, but I don't want to get into that whole thing.
I call it a sport. I don't split hairs. I call it a sport.
That's fine. I mean, I have too for years, but again, if we're splitting hairs, it's not really, but it kind of is, and all that. The bottom line is you can't guarantee anything, right? Like there is a minimum for a PGA player, like we said. Even if you suck or you're down at the bottom, you get something, right? Like you get, and their numbers are a lot bigger than our numbers. We can't do that because even though you joined the club, well, listen, does the last place guy deserve anything? I mean, listen, you got your ass handed to you. You took last. Is that worth something? I don't know. You know what I mean? Who's paying that?
Well, maybe your placing isn't worth something. Maybe you are an eccentric individual. Maybe you're very personable. Maybe you finished last, but everybody loves you out there in social media. So you have sponsors and you're making money.
And you are free to make all the money you can out of your social media from that.
And like I was going to say, I do think that it does come down to an amount, a very large amount to individuals. Nobody's handed anything in this life, whether it be in bodybuilding or anything else. And like I was going to say, when I took over this diving company that I run now, my father owned this before me. 10 years ago, I took it over. I was 27 years old. Everybody said, well, nobody handed me a company. Fucking bullshit. Commercial diving is one of the hardest jobs that you can have anywhere. Okay. Astronauts train underwater in order to go to fucking outer space. It's one of the hardest jobs you can have anywhere. And nobody handed it to me. I had to put my money on the line in order to take over the company, put my ass out there so that I could take it over someday by going to the bank. And anyway, that's how it happened. It came down to me. Did I have an opportunity? Yes. Did I put everything into it in order to capitalize on that opportunity? Yes, I did, which is exactly what bodybuilders need to do as well. Which
do you have employees?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So if one of your employees came to you and held you up and said, hey, man, listen, I think I'm good enough that I should be getting twice the amount of money as I'm getting, your answer would be what?
Well, that would warrant a conversation. We would
Of
sit
course.
down and we would say, oh, it would come down to a performance evaluation. Explain to
Right.
me why you deserve this, you know?
And he said,
then
because I deserve it, because I just think I'm that good. And I think I've lent this. So I need you to double my salary or I'm quitting.
Well, you got to tell me why you think it's worth it. Just to say, yeah, I think I'm worth it. Well, okay, why? Explain to me why. What have you done in the last year which benefits the company? How have you progressed as a person that shows me that you're going to stay with the company, which is a big one, right? Because we have to look out for the company as a whole as well, the future of the company. These are the questions that would come from a conversation like that, a performance review. Perhaps it does merit that an individual does deserve a raise to an extent.
But you see where I'm going with this is, as per all the union talk and things like that, this is the same type of conversation that I bring up to people where it's like, you're an athlete and you're going to go to the IFBB and you're going to demand that they pay you extra. You got to bring this. We don't make enough money, you know, this, and they're going to go, well, we can't do that. It doesn't, what you do doesn't merit that, right? But we, based on what you bring to the table. Okay. And again, not that it even works like that because you have an individual business. So, you know, there are differences there, but it's the same concept, right? Yeah, we can't do that. We can't, you know, and you say, well, if you don't do it, then I quit. And they're going to go, okay, quit. And somebody else is right behind him going, hey, man, I'll take that job for this guy's making, how much is he making? 100 grand a year? Sure, I'll step right in there. Right. And that's the problem you got with this type of a thing where it's like, look, the athletes don't have any collective power. And because they don't have any collective power, nothing's ever going to go anywhere with that type of attitude. This is why I took, just to circle back, this is why I took the position of athletes rep. And people, oh, he's a company man. He's a company shill. He works for the federation. It's like, well, first of all, I've never gotten a check from the federation. So I'd like to see where that is. I've never gotten a dime for being the athlete's rep. But more importantly, the only reason that we've gotten the things that we have was because I have a good relationship with Jim Mannion and the powers that be and the IFBB Pro League. And I've always been in good standing, right? And I've always looked out for the betterment of not just the athletes, but both. How can this benefit both? Because if it doesn't benefit one side or the other, it's not going to work. So when I would come up with an idea, like, let's do a 212 division, which technically was the 202 when it first, or I'm sorry, I got to correct myself. Technically it was the 210 when it started, but
okay.
Not to get mired in detail. And they said, okay, we like it. And we think it's got some promise and we're going to approve it. So your proposal is approved. We're going to start this federation. That benefited the athletes and the federation. It benefited the federation because obviously we got other shows, other sanction fees, right, that they're going to collect and all that kind of stuff. It benefited the judges because there's more shows for them to judge to get paid for. It benefited the promoters because it's more shows the promoters can put on. It benefited the athletes mostly because it gave them a platform to compete on a even playing field is how I looked at it at the time. Same thing with women's physique. It's like, well, look, we got a spot for you right here, and we're going to put that in. So yeah, did it benefit the athletes and the federation? Of course it did. But that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. So why people get, again, mired down in that your company man type of thing. There's nothing I've ever put in there, not one proposal ever, that has only benefited the federation. They don't need the help.
Okay. With that being said, actually, Lee did have something to say about you being paid or not paid by the IFBB. I do have a clip here that I'll share with you. We'll get your take on this.
Sure.
Bob said it was the athlete's rep. I'm like, Bob, you're the IFBB rep. The IFBB doesn't pay me. Well, technically, no. It's like if I worked at Trump Towers, Donald Trump doesn't technically pay me, but, you know, the organization does. So it's like Bob MCs the Olympia, Bob MCs IFBB shows, Bob NPCs NPC shows. So technically, in a roundabout way, you are being paid by the organization, whether it's from a promoter, but they're still got to get sanctioned. So he would never say nothing bad about it and lose all that gig, because if I worked for Trump Towers and I badmouthed Trump, I'm sure I wouldn't have a job. So it's like, so in a roundabout way, he might not get a check or something saying from the IFBB, but his income does come a lot from being in the IFBB doing these MC jobs. He's not doing them for free, is he? And stuff like that.
No, well, let's talk about Bob and being the athlete's rep. You know, is he a...
Yeah. Okay. So,
So
like I said, according to
that's got to
Lee
be
here,
one of the dumbest things I've ever heard come out of Lee's mouth. And believe me, there's a long list of dumb things. And don't take that wrong. Listen, me and Lee, we have at it. You know, again, it's a love-hate relationship type thing, like he's got with Sean and almost everybody else. That's got to be one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. So by emceeing shows, I get paid from the IFBB. As I just explained to you how the show works. If you're a promoter, again, if you got your sanction from Jim for your EP, championships there, right? They don't give you me. They don't sit there. Okay, well, you got to hire Bob and give him $10,000, right? You can go hire whoever you want. People hire me for their shows because they like what I do or like what I bring, or on the Voice of Bodybuilding or all that kind of good stuff, right? Great. But make no mistake, again, the only show I've ever gotten paid from the Federation, if you want to call it that, is Jim's show because he's the promoter of the Pittsburgh. So, yeah, he does pay me for that, I guess, if you want to count that. The other 10,486 shows I've done, I don't know. I seem to get paid from the promoter who hires me privately to do that. Again, that's just a stupid way. Well, he kind of indirectly in the Trump and, well, no, you are getting paid from Trump. What do you mean indirectly? It's like that. He's absolutely paying you. I know he doesn't go up to you and hand you a check, like to the doorman and stuff. Hey, here you go, Charlie. But that was just a point that was completely lost. Trying to justify again that I'm some sort of company man, which is just kind of comical, honestly. But you should play the clip where he actually said we didn't really need a union. We just needed everybody to stick together.
Yeah, I heard Lee talk about how athletes are not informed who is the athlete's rep when they do become pro. And you actually did say earlier in this conversation about how you do consider it to an extent more of a honorary role at this point. If there's been nobody that came to you in over 10 years with any issues, and you don't.
Well, this is the thing is, I don't know, what are all these grave, maybe you can help me with this because I can't get this answer out of anybody, but what are all these grave injustices that they think that I'm going to bring to the table on their behalf, or the problems, or that this is so dire that these athletes are just living in, the conditions are unlivable, or you volunteer to go in these shows. You decide what competitions you go in. We allow the same platform that's, a proper stage, a proper judging panel, a proper method of competing, right? This isn't like some podunk little, alphabet soup federation that you hear about all these weird things that go on out there and all that. We obviously are the most established club in the business, okay? Those are the conditions that you're in. You all get treated equally. Everybody gets treated the same, okay? We don't favor people or other people. We don't give pro cards. Well, we can argue about there's too many of them, and that's a whole other thing. We don't hand pick who's going to get them. We have an old expression, you win, you're in. Okay, this ain't the old Raphael days or overseas where they would, again, pick people or, hey, well, it's going to cost you 20 grand. We'll give you a pro card or, that kind of weird shit. People could say a lot of things about us as a federation, but the one thing they could never say is we've always stuck to our guns when it came to the process of turning professional. So that said, and I'm asking you, maybe you can lend some clarity to me for that, but what are these, working in a mine, with mine dust and black lung conditions that these athletes are in, that they need that such help that I got to put out an SOS every day to let them know bring your complaints to me. What complaints do these athletes have? Can you give me a few?
Well, what Lee is saying, I think, is that the question isn't even being asked to the athletes. Where is the forum for the athletes to ask these questions? Like he mentioned, and I have my own opinion about this. He mentioned, well, maybe at athletes meetings before shows that the question could be asked at that point. Lee mentioned it in the video. He said, if Bob is there,
let me just interject on that. The last time you should ever be asking athletes anything is at a show at the athletes meeting. Okay, when they're sitting there starving, eating sawdust for the last 3 months, right? Getting ready for a competition. They got to go get their tan. They got to go get their makeup. And so, do you think anybody at that point is going to give two shits? A, about who the athlete's rep is, and B, I did have a question about, and again, I'm still waiting for that question. Again, what are the questions that they would have even of, hey, man, how come we can't get more money for the bikini, pro show? And then it's going to be the same answer, right? Which is, well, you want me to go, every show should be $10,000 minimum for the bikini winner. And you want me to bring that to the pro league when I already know the answer, which is no. And that's not our job. And that's up to the promoter. There's nothing I can do on your behalf other than tell you, don't go in the shows then. Like, why are you supporting shows? If you keep showing up, why would they give you anything more than what they're giving you or what they're willing to give you? Why?
The other thing with that is, I think considering asking the question as Lee suggested at the athletes meetings, well, you're not at every show. You don't MC every show. You're not at every show. You know, there's a lot of shows.
The answer out of my mouth, bro. Yeah, I'm not. Listen,
there's a lot of pro shows. Think about not just the open shows, the 212 shows that take place. There's nothing but 212 division classes. Right. Like you're not at all these shows, right? To try and have a representative there, would be
again.
And listen, like you said, not the time to ask that question.
People have direct contact to the pro league office. You don't need me for anything, like I say, in effect, right? Again, this is the same address they use to enter the very show that he's asking, that they should be asking me questions, right? If you're unwilling to put your name to a simple question, I mean, where the hell are you going in life, right? But I mean, what question do you have? Like, again, let me guess. The athlete felt as though they were judged unfairly, right? Again, back to square one, right? Let me guess. Your mother thinks you should have won. Your wife thinks you got screwed. Oh, they're trying to push you out. Oh, clearly they're sending a message, right? This is not unique. Every single show that happened the last 2 weeks in America and abroad, somebody had that notion, right? Somebody had that. If I send you these pictures, I mean, can you explain to me why this guy beat me? I mean, that's what you're going to get. So to answer your question from earlier, yes, I have gotten those type of things where it's like, bro, go ask the judge for feedback if that's what you want to do on the spot, because it's going to be a lot easier there. And especially like if you're, towards the bottom, the answer is going to be pretty stuck. Hey, I was last out of 30 people. Okay, well, what do I need to work on? Everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. You're dead last. I mean, no offense, right? But it's not like there was if only that one thing you would have won, but kind of puts you in the last place. You got to work on everything. But I mean, we're in a sport of ego, and the problem is, and this pertains a lot to the discussion that we're all having last week. It's the ego that's the problem, not the physique. People cannot accept that somebody was just better, or that there was a legitimate or you didn't look as good as you thought you did, or that type of thing. So the problem is the ego is the problem. And then you surround yourself with 5,000 of your closest friends, and that's funny. I went on my Instagram and everybody said I got screwed. It's like, well, you don't say. I mean, like, well, that's crazy. So, I mean, seriously?
No, understood when it comes to that. That certainly does happen. But I think that the idea of, like you said, the egos and the emotions, well, you have as a potential an athlete's rep in order to remove that amount, to be able to bring this to someone and for them to be able to approach this from a place of not having any personal interest in whatever the question may be, whether it be
Sure.
Judging, whether it be money. It's in order to remove that. But I think that the position of athlete's rep being, especially a volunteer position, especially with what you've done over the last 20 years, maybe that does need to be a paid position in order to have framework of accountability. Because think about it as personal training. It's a very, very good analogy here. If you get personal training for free from someone, you go to a friend and you say, hey, I want you to train me. Okay. I can't be here on Wednesday. Well, I can't be here on Friday. When you're actually paying for something,
Yeah.
It certainly does add value and it adds accountability. So maybe that is there's a lot of solutions that I think where you explained when it comes to, and these are things that I didn't necessarily consider when it comes to the framework of the organization versus other professional organizations, because I've made reference to things like you could use the framework of the NFL or the NHL that have players unions play. It's not the same. I understand what you're saying.
And again, the IFBB does not have to entertain it. They don't have to recognize anybody. If they went out and put Matt in as the athlete's rep, right? And he says, hey, I want to be the athlete's rep. And they go, I'm going to go do all my listeners. I'm going to get them to sign this paper and I'm going to send it to Jim Mannion. Okay. And he sends it to Jim Mannion. Jim Mannion's going to look at that and go, who's this guy? And then he's going to throw it in the garbage, right? They don't have to entertain you. They don't even have to recognize you. They don't have to have an athlete's rep position. The athletes can sign all the papers they want. That doesn't mean anything.
Well, both Matt and Lee said that it should actually be here. I've got one other clip here. I'm
Sure.
sure that you're going to respond to this on your channel as well. But
Probably.
one other clip here where they actually say that perhaps this should be something. Maybe it's time for a new athlete's rep. They named it.
Like I said, like Bob, if Bob has the job or somebody else wants it, if Bob says he's had it that long, maybe he just doesn't have the thing for it. Maybe have a vote and find somebody new who wants to be out there and be the athlete's rep, somebody that goes around the contest and walks up to people, hey, any problems? That's the thing too, when Bob goes to these expos even, as the athlete's rep, yes, I know Bob goes around and talks to people, says hello, takes a photo. Yeah. Why can't he walk up to a pro at the expo if they're at a booth? Hey, how you going? Good. You look great today. Oh, are there any issues, any problems going on that I need to know about? I'm sure he doesn't ask that to everybody going around, because sometimes it's a competitor too. If you're in the moment at an expo, you're competing, doing stuff, your mind not be on that issue. You're too busy thinking about signing pictures, doing this, doing that. You're thinking of the contest. So if he said, hey, any issues, problems, just let me know. And Bob could have
maybe,
a little note.
Maybe it doesn't need to be Bob. Maybe people are a little bit intimidated to go to Bob because Bob is on the Olympia, like he's right. And like maybe someone less just that is like
all right.
just a normal person.
People watching this now in the pros, you write me. And once I get your inquiries, I'll send them on to Bob, because Bob and I are like,
yeah, I'm sure.
Gotta love Lee.
I can see that.
Yeah, he's a funny little man. I mean, but again, put anybody you want in there. What are they bringing to the table? What are you going to the pro league with? I'm still waiting for all these, again, these horrible things that these athletes are having to endure out there in a sport that you choose to be in, and in competitions that you choose to be in. Again, but what are these grave injustices? I can never get an answer out of anybody of what they think. I mean, last year or the year before, probably 2 years ago now, I know me and Fuad got into it about the whole athletes rep thing, and it came up in this conversation. It blew up into this whole thing. But at the end of the day, and I told Fuad, as we had a conversation, bro, you have Jim's number. Call him. If you got an idea, go. You don't need me, right? But if you're asking these questions, but the things he was asking were, and I'm not making light of it, I'm just using this as an example, right? Like he said, he thinks the same lighting should be at every pro show that we have. That's a big problem. Lighting is all over the place, right? It's good at some shows, it's bad at other shows, right? This and that. Now, that's not untrue, with the exception of one thing. How is that a pro league matter? Number one. And two, his suggestion at the time, and I know they were just talking, right? But still, was maybe we can have like one guy, that kind of is in charge. Like he goes around and he sets up the lighting in all the shows. Do you know how many shows there are in a given week or a given month in a given year? First of all, and who pays that guy? Like, who pays the light guy now? So, like, if there's two shows on two different, cities, who's paying for all this equipment? Like, who's shipping it? Like, I mean, these aren't things like, bro, it's impossible. And he's a promoter, so he knows better. It's impossible to have the same exact lighting for 1,000 different reasons. Ambient light, stage light versus expo light, bringing in external lighting versus built-in lighting. There's 100,000 things that are different. And let me tell you something. When you, remember, we're getting the EP championships together here, right, bro? You paid your sanction. You paid your $40,000 in prize money. It's an escrow, right? All that stuff. We're good. Oh, yeah, that's right. You got to have the place you just rented. You have to use their lighting. Okay, that's part of the package. If anybody's ever rented out a facility, a theater type style, any of those type of things, the lighting is built in and it's a separate cost. You can't bring in Joe Blow lighting, that has been set forth to put the same lighting. You can't do it. So and I bring this stuff up, and this isn't, again, me and Fuad have, gotten on the same page. We're cool and all that. But I bring this up as an example. You want me to go to gym with this? Or you would go to gym with us, and he's going to get the same answer I just gave you. Or, he advocated for having, he doesn't like a lot of the busy backgrounds, a lot of these LED backgrounds. We need black curtains behind the athlete so you can see the athlete. I get what he's saying. I don't even disagree in context. But you got promoters paying a shitload of money, for those screens, for those LEDs. Now, don't get me wrong. I was the first person to complain a couple of years ago at the Olympia that I thought the stuff was a little out of control, because you don't need a lot of moving parts and stuff going on. When you're trying to assess a physique. You also don't need a 1985, black curtain that's dull and, uninspiring, right? These stages sometimes are tens of thousands of dollars. So I get that you're trying to sell tickets. I get you're trying to be appealing. You're trying to look professional. you'd like to dress it up a little bit, so it doesn't look like we're back in a high school and again in the 80s, for a competition. But to mandate such a thing across the board is nearly impossible. It's nearly impossible. How would we do this? Like, how would it be implemented? I know the answers to a lot of these things, but I have to weed out. You asked me earlier how many complaints I get or things and stuff. I don't get a lot. I get very little if I've gotten any over years. But some of it, I'd have to weed through. Some of the stuff I wouldn't even bring to the table because it was so ludicrous or just, out there. It's like, I'm not bringing this to the pro. They're going to think I'm the idiot. You know what I mean? Advocating for this or some unreasonable request because the person asking doesn't know enough about what they're asking to know the answer.
Okay, so when it comes to there's a couple of things to unpack there. I think you mentioned the lighting. How would you have the same lighting for each show? Well, we talked about some of the other professional organizations out there when it comes to, say, consider the NHL or PGA or NFL. Well, they all have fields or ice rinks or fields that or whatever it is that they play on, greens and things like that.
Sure.
There are standards that exist with those things.
Hang on.
State.
Hang on.
Well,
you know what the difference is? Every NHL game is played in the exact same formatted place. It's called an arena. Every basketball game is played in an arena. Right? Every wrestling, outing, the Raw, or SmackDown is in an arena. This is the exact same lighting stuff in almost any arena that you go to in the world. Every football game is played in a football stadium. Every baseball game is played in a baseball stadium. With minor differences, they're all the same. Bodybuilding shows, which aren't put on by the NFL, aren't put on by Major League Baseball, as we talked about, right? They're put on by individual promoters who just rented out whatever, arena over here, or they rented out some theater to put the show in, and they got a whole different lighting scheme. So just to interject and answer that quickly, it's impossible because our shows are all over, from high schools to auditoriums to theaters to arenas. So it is impossible to have the same exact lighting at every single show. Can't happen.
Okay, the exact same, perhaps not, but like I was saying,
that's what
the
we're talking about.
Hear me out. The NHL, the NFL, they all have the sanction. Well, they are the sanctioning bodies, but they have rules where a rink has to be to a certain size.
Of course. Sure.
There's certain many yards. So perhaps you could, and I don't know if the conversation has ever come up of even saying like a light package comes with a venue. Well, perhaps it doesn't necessarily need to come with a venue necessarily. Consider even to say if the IFBB was to say, look, all of the lighting has to, the number of lights might be one thing, but all of the lights have to be and just throwing things out there, a cool white of this distance from the athletes at this angle at this number of lumens. Okay. Would that not at least keep things as a level playing field to an extent?
Here's the problem, bro. Okay, so I just checked with the theater. They don't have that. Now what?
Then it's on the promoter.
Well, but here's my question, though. Do we cancel the show? So you
change the venue.
Well, hang on. We can't, bro. You know how hard it is to get a venue? I mean, trust me. Again, I've done this. Getting a venue is tough enough. Getting it on the dates you want is even tougher. Getting it at a cost that's, again, we just went through this thing. The EP Classic. The venue alone costs us $25,000, right? And it was tough to find, right? We had to get this date, it can't interfere with any other dates. You can see where this becomes very convoluted. But at the end of the day, they just told us, we just called, you and I just called, EP Classic on this date, right? It's at this venue. Great, we're all set. Hey, man, we need this particular lighting package. And they said, yeah, we don't have that. Listen, you have to use the lighting that we have. That's what we got. We can make some considerations, but no, sorry. No. We've been advertising this thing for 6-8 months. We've got hundreds of NPC athletes and dozens, if not more, IFBB pros that are getting ready. So we got to cancel the show because the lighting may not be exactly how it was spelled. You see what I mean? This is where it becomes tricky because it's like, well, wait a minute. Again, as the athlete's rep, you know what my question is? Was the lighting the same for all the competitors? Was it different for anybody else? Was when Phil Clayhar, I'll have to bring him up again, right? Was at that show when he was down in the bottom column. Was he so far over on the side that the light was out over there? Well, wait a minute. I got a problem with that now, right? Wait a minute. This guy was standing in the dark.
That shouldn't be the case.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying, though, right? That would be an issue of, wait a minute. This athlete was not treated fairly. He was way off on the side. There was no lighting over there, right? The whole thing. Now I got a problem. Right? Because no, that's not cool. That's not fair. It wasn't fair to him. Did not get judged fairly, right? Obviously, that wasn't the case. We're using this as an extreme. But the answer, what do we cancel the show?
No, you don't cancel the show, but you make sure that it's set up so that at least it's, say you can have transferable things that go along with the show. The stage, promoters, I would imagine, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, do promoters own a stage that they set up in a venue, or does the venue? No. The venue provides even the stage itself. Yeah,
there are few promoters. I know two, I think, off the top of my head. No, most 99% of promoters do not own their own equipment. They rent it out at a place. And if you're in a union hall, you ain't bringing in shit. There is no bringing in anything. You're at a union hall. You use their stuff and you pay out the ass for lighting and staging and risers and steps. And there's nothing that you don't pay for at a union hall. You get crushed.
Well, perhaps the promoters should own this equipment so that there is a standard, whether you're doing it in Brazil, whether you're doing it in Georgia.
Where are you storing it?
If it costs that's for a promoter to figure out, man. I don't know.
Bro, you're right. I've already outlined to you. The promoter ain't making nothing. He's already hoping to get his money back, maybe, right? So now, now promoter guy is gone because look, I ain't buying this. You know what? I'm just not going to put on the show. And now shows start to disappear. And who's that hurt? The athletes.
Well, I'm considered a small business, man. No customer of mine, and I work for federal government. I work for environmental and civil construction consultants. Nobody asked me, well, where are you storing your trailers? I've got 7 boats. I've got 2 dive trailers. I've got tons of good. Nobody's asking me where I'm storing it or how I'm buying it. What I have to do is I have to adhere to a certain standard, and I have to have the equipment in order to facilitate that. If the IFBB was to say, like I said, and this is me just my own thoughts on this. Okay. This lumen with this white lighting at this distance from the athletes at this angle as a potential, and that's me never doing lighting at a show. I understand that. You guys have to figure it out. Well, promoters, if they operate nationally, internationally, then I am sure that they could figure something out. I figured out where to put all my gear. You know,
well, listen, I got to be fair. There are a few shows that the lighting is that bad. I mean, yeah, we get you're good and you're bad and you're ugly. Anything in between. Most of them
it's not about good or bad. It's about the same. It's not about good or bad. It's about the same.
And it is the same for all the athletes that are there. It's the same lighting, whether it's shitty lighting or whether it's good lighting. It's the same lighting, right? And again, that's what I have to look at. Again, was somebody singled out, or was it the same for everybody? Right? That's what an athlete rep does. But the answer, just to go back real quick, bro. A guy's going to put on one show a year, and you want him to pay for storage for 11 months for a gigantic stage, lighting, all the things that come with it? No way.
What promoter only puts on one show? Your Muscle Contest puts on dozens of shows around the world. Like two bros put on shows internationally.
Well, listen, Muscle Contest, Tamer, who's a very good friend of mine, yeah, he's the biggest promoter we have in the world. He has his own LED screen. He doesn't have his own.
He couldn't afford a lighting package. Tell me he couldn't afford it.
He puts on shows all over the world. So are you driving your stage to Brazil? Because that might be a problem.
What's the difference of a lighting package? What's the difference of a lighting package versus an LED screen? You know, not all venues are going to have an LED screen.
Even if it's, listen, a background even, right? A background, the stage itself, or risers. If the place is in a arena, you got to set up risers. The thing is built, right? Well, I can't ship one of those to Ireland. So I got to rent the one that's in Ireland, right? And they have their own parameters of things and stuff like that. I'm telling you, there's a lot more involved. When you start peeling back the layers, you can see already just from our conversation, which I do appreciate, that there's a lot to unpack and there's a lot of layers. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't think of that. And wait a minute, that's right. Yeah, who would pay for that? And there's a lot of that, bro.
What I really like here, Bob, is that I was able to ask you some of these questions from the perspective of somebody that does operate an amount of equipment throughout certain provinces. Like, man, I just did a dive job up in the fucking Arctic where I had to fly 3 pallets worth of gear up there in order to set up in a 20-foot sea can in order for us to burn steel up there underwater. Right? So this is where I was coming from, and
you're also a private
some of these
business,
layers.
and you make. I mean, let's just say I don't want to get into your finances. I don't think that's appropriate. But let's just say you're a $3 million company, right? You're doing pretty damn good, right? Well, listen, good for you. You're a private business. You're making good returns and all that. These people ain't making a dime. They're not making a dime. Most of them are losing money. Trust me on this one. They're not making anything. They're not.
I know you mentioned that, but like I said, I enjoy the fact that these are actually conversations that I have not heard on other channels that you've been on when it comes to some of these nuances. Yes,
no, you're asking, in fairness, you're asking good questions, because these are questions I wish people, hosts would ask. And unfortunately, some of the shows I've been on lately, they're not asking me anything of any worth. They're just getting muddled in this garbage. And, well, Lee said this and this one said that. I would love to be able to answer all these, and these are smart questions. And again, that's why I appreciate it, because I'm hoping that I'm shedding some light on people going, oh, wait a minute, I never thought of that. Or, geez, I didn't know that's the way that worked, or, whatever. Okay, listen, I, more than anybody, a guy who competed for many years in the pro league, right? Now, I would have liked nothing more to have gotten a shitload more money, for winning, placing, or showing. But it's not reality. What I was able to do was take what I got, took my experience, took my expertise, and I turned it into something that I do now, which for the most part, obviously, is, emceeing, and obviously being involved in business and various aspects, the VOB, my channel and all that. If you got to take this as a stepping stone to something else, if anybody thinking, and listen, there's only one thing, I've said this for many years now. There is only one thing that every single bodybuilder on this earth from 1950 up until today have in common. One thing. And that is that no bodybuilder, no pro bodybuilder ever got into the sport for the money. Ever. Nobody ever. You could pick a lot of different things, bro, right? You could listen. I could have gone a lot of different roads if I was looking for money. And I was very athletic, and I played football, and I played baseball, and bowling, and this and that, golfing. I should have been a pro golfer if I was a smart guy, but that's another tale. But no bodybuilder ever got into this for the money. They got into it for the love of the game, all right? For to better themselves, and that turned into competition, or that turned into a goal to get to the Mr. Olympia or whatever. But money has never been the motivating factor when it came to this. It just turned into an offshoot of, oh, I can make some money from this thing. It's always been more of a hobby than a real sport. And again, when we compare it to other sports, we're not in the same ballpark.
These days, the fitness industry is worth a lot of money, and bodybuilders have found their way to monetize themselves. These days, it is most definitely something where if you are good enough and you have the work ethic to go into it, which pro bodybuilders do, and you hear about that all the time, where guys, after competing, take the things that they've learned from pro bodybuilding, the discipline, the routine, and apply it elsewhere in business, and are very successful because of that. Absolutely. I definitely agree.
We just explored somebody's names earlier: Gasperi, Labrada, again, various guys in the industry, guys who have gone on to create businesses. Like I say, dovetail that and the other. Listen, there are some NPC promoters who do make a good dollar. They used to compete, became a promoter, put on big NPC shows. Ed and Betty Pariso, again, two close friends of mine. They've been putting on expos for years. Expos with different events and different things, bodybuilding being one of them. But yeah, you have to take this as an opportunity, and you're right. You got to take it and apply it to something else. If you think that the sport you got into just for the love of it and to try to get to the top, of the ladder is gonna, you're gonna make a living out of it. Those percentages are very, very small in any sport, let alone ours. There's 10 guys making a living. Everybody else has got other work that they're doing. Or, Chris Bumstead has made 100 times more money off the stage than he ever has on the stage.
Absolutely. And he'll continue to do so. But
at least until he announces his retirement this year. I think he's got a big announcement this week, doesn't he?
Yeah. Do you think that's what it's going to be in 2 days there?
I'm guessing like everybody else, because I don't really know. But all I could think of is he's probably, I could be way off in left field, but if I was betting, I would say he's going to come out and say this is going to be his last Olympia, and he's going to, they got, family that they're raising now, and this and that and all that. That would be my guess, but maybe he'll fool me wrong. Maybe he's got a new, protein powder or something. He's come out. I don't know, but I did think that was interesting, though, that he kind of called for a press conference of sorts. I mean, I would think it'd be something major.
Okay. My boy's here with me too.
Your boy, he just disappeared into the green screen like a ghost. It was kind of cool.
Yeah, he did. Here, walk in here, bud. Look. Say hi.
That's great.
No?
Hey, what's up, buddy?
He's now my 7-year-old boy. I use him sometimes when I train. I'm like you, I've got a home gym, and I'll use him. He'll sit on my back. He's about 70 pounds now. I'll do push-ups with him and stuff like that. It's fun.
Where do you live, bro?
Well, I live in a place called Cape Breton. It's in Nova Scotia. It is the most eastern point until you have to get on a ferry to go to Newfoundland. So in the North Atlantic here.
You're up by the Laginas digging for that treasure, aren't you? Aren't you up in that area?
Listen, Rick Lagina contacted me back 10 years ago, man. And this is a sticking point for me. He contacted me. He said, hey, man, I need divers. And this is what I got. He said, I want you guys to go down. Yeah, it sounds great. He said, I want you to, this is what I got. He said, I've got a pipe that's about 120 feet underwater and it's about this diameter. And I want to put divers in there. And I was like, no, that is super fucking dangerous, man. I am not doing that. I said, but what I can offer you is an underwater robot. It's called an ROV, a remotely operated vehicle, right?
Okay.
We'll fly it from surface. I'll put it into that pipe and we'll see exactly what we got. And you know what he said? He said, yeah, that's a really good idea. That sounds good. He said, send me a price. I sent him a price. Never heard from him. Called him back a week later. What do you think, Rick? He said, yeah, that was a really good idea. I found an ROV up here in Halifax. Thanks.
Come on. Bro, that was your claim to fame, man. You could have been finding the Oak Island. I've been watching this thing for as long as it's been. I gotta say, I know this is a tangent, but I gotta get off on a tangent. Bro, 10 years. 10 years I'm waiting. You guys can't get anything? Nothing?
It's killing nothing there, man. I know guys that have been on that show, and my company actually was contracted here this summer. I have a 46-foot boat that's like a fishing style boat. We use it for diving operations. A movie production company came to me. They came to me with a film that they were making about lobster fishermen in a place just down from here called Little Lorraine, about a story back in the 1980s where these lobster fishermen were contracted to smuggle cocaine ashore. And they said they needed the cocaine smuggling boat. They found me and they used my boat as the prop in the movie as the cocaine smuggling boat. So that's going to be coming out later this year. It's super cool, man. I tell you, like diving and what I've been doing, like my father started this company in 1991. I was born in 1987. And I've done this basically, I've been around this since I was 4 years old. But since I took over 10 years ago, we just started out as a company teaching dive courses, doing dive charters and things like that. Never did I think I'd be going to places like the Arctic or somebody hiring me for a movie or,
Hey, pretty cool. Yeah.
It's a life of adventure, man. It honestly is. And, this YouTube thing, as I needed an outlet for my love of bodybuilding myself, and diving is not conducive with being a competitive bodybuilder.
No.
This is where it takes me. We talked about applying things from other portions of life into something. Well, the first video I ever edited was a diving video. So this is where it's taken me, and it's taken me to conversations like this.
What other burning questions you got, bro? There's something you always wanted to know or you wanted, ask or whatever. I got answers. It's no holds barred, bro. Bring it on.
No, I understand that. I do. But no, those were the big things that I really did want to know. And I knew that if we could get into a conversation around more of the business aspects and some of the considerations I had coming from my background of owning a business, being an employer, being through, a conversation with, I had a union come to me back about 10 years ago when I didn't know anything. And they told me, they said, we're looking to unionize divers and, we can force your hand on this. And I was like, really? They didn't end up doing it because their agreement was dog shit. But anyway, that's where a lot of this came from me. No, look, let's talk about just to wrap a couple things up here. Look, we got the Olympia coming up. I've heard it on some other outlets where you've got your idea of where we might see certain individuals place at the Olympia. But tell me, where do you see Derek versus Hadi this year? That seems to be the 1 and 2. And do you think Andrew Jack can interject himself truly to be the winner this year?
I like Andrew Jack. I like what he brings. I think he's made huge progress this past year. This guy is a beast. He had to fill out, and he did that, and he kept that waist small. Well, you saw in Texas, honestly, That's automatic top
Dynamite.
6. That there's no question there, right? Now the question is going to be top 3. The main guy he'd have to knock out in that, and what we're talking about currently, would be Samson. Now, Samson, I'm a big fan of. I've always liked his physique. I've known him a long time. I knew him when he was, before everybody knew he was Samson and all that, and he kind of found his way because I was putting on shows in the UK, and that's where I met him. And I could see it then. You could look at him and go, man, this guy's, if he fills out or he gets a little, supersized, man, this kid's good. And he did that. The only problem with Samson is we discussed this before, is he's got to get that conditioning in a 95 percentile. He can't be in the 90 percentile, and I use these figures, these percentiles and such, but just to illustrate. Derek and Hottie are in the 100 percentile. Okay, these guys are ripped, diced up, especially Hottie, probably even a little more than Derek. They both got exceptional physiques. They're very comparable in their size, their shape, their all that stuff. Derek's got a little bit more shape, a little symmetry and proportions, a little bit better. Hottie's got more dense muscularity and more mature physique. Conditioning is the best out of anybody. Samson controls his own destiny. And why the reason I say that is this: Samson can get what they got, but they can't get what Samson's got. Samson's got height, he's got width, he's got the X-frame, proportion, shape, symmetry, the power of presentation. He presents himself better than anybody, but he's got to get the condition. So, but can he get it? That's the big $1 million question. If Samson can get in the 95 percentile, he would be your new Mr. Olympia. If. That's a big if, okay? We haven't seen it yet. Can he do it? We're going to find out. He's obviously very formidable still. The question is how does Andrew Jack compare to him? Now, Andrew Jack is 2 inches taller, a few pounds bigger, believe it or not, because Samson's a huge, but Jack is huge, right? But Jack has beautiful proportions also. Those two can help each other at this Olympia. Bodybuilding at that level is all about matchups, okay? Like when Jay Cutler was winning Olympias, he was able to help bring up Branch Warren because, in effect, they were 2 blocky white guys, okay, with great conditioning and good muscle and all that, right? But they didn't have the shape like the brothers, right, and all that. I mean, that's very obvious. But because Jay was up there in the champ, in comparison, Branch was right there, and he actually took a second place, right? The minute Jay retired, that was the worst thing that ever happened to Branch was that Jay retired. Because that left him as, one of these things doesn't belong here, right? He wasn't matching up with Dexter, this guy, that guy, right? All those top guys, right? For that time. In this instance, Samson and Jack can help each other. If they're both on in terms of conditioning, which they both had, I don't want to say an issue with because we're splitting hairs, but you know what I mean? That's kind of the Achilles heel so far. If they can both get up into that thing, listen, they can upset some apples here real quick because they're both huge, tower over these guys, and they can help each other. The other guys can actually help themselves if they come in as on and stuff, and they make these guys look tall and lanky. So it's all about comparisons in these type of matchups. Not that they go in groups like that, because sometimes, like listen, we got Derek Hottie, then you got Samson, who's huge, then you got Nick, who's obviously shorter, and that type of thing. This is going to be a real interesting. And then you got the black sheep, the dark horse of the mix, which is Beirut. This kid's good, man. I was right there. I called his victory in Dubai. He's bigger than you think he is. He's taller than you think he is. He's got a lot of muscle. Yeah, he can still work on a few things, but so can everybody else. If he can get over here, and I still don't know if he can or can't. I haven't heard any confirmation. I hear he has. I hear he hasn't. I don't know. If he can get over here, he is the upsetter. He's going to kick somebody out of that top 6.
The word as of right now is that he still has not received his visa, and we are getting to a point where if he hasn't received it by now, he's been waiting since 2022 and still has not received it.
You hate to see that because he's literally mired in politics, in his government, and things like that. I don't know his personal circumstances. I don't think there's anything there. There are other athletes who can't get to America for various reasons, but they have backgrounds that don't, won't allow them to come into this country. And that's too bad, again, because you hate to ever see a guy with that good who can't get in here for no good reason other than his country says no. And he's been waiting, you're right, for years now for an answer. And he's kind of been told, from what I hear off the record, he's kind of been told, like, look, bro, yeah, you already inquired. Yeah, we know. Okay, so Just wait for us now. Like stop asking, like that type of a thing. And it's like, well, what do you expect from the guy? You know what I mean? Like, Jesus. So
yeah, I'd keep asking the question. He actually went to a company over there in Iran. I thought he was trying to take maybe more of the Hadi Chupin route, where he would become an employee of a company and then he would be able to get a work visa that way. But this is not a company that is involved in fitness or anything like that. There was some sort of a petroleum manufacturing company that made everything from drilling fluids to additives of coloring for soaps and things like that. Maybe not the best route, might have a lot of money. They might do international travel, but when it comes to an athlete, and anyway, we'll see what happens with Beirut.
Well, assuming he's out, okay, because we have to take assumptions. Like I have no confirmation. I've heard that I have no confirmation that Big Rami's competing. I don't have any reason to believe he is, but then again, he hasn't said he isn't. So I mean, if we have to take certain assumptions that so Rami's out, Beirut is out,
Beirut is out.
And we're going to go with who we do believe is going to be there. And then, of course, we got to go with the assumption everybody shows up in shape. So
that's right.
The fight really for me is going to be even tougher between 4, 5, and 6, because you got about 6 guys that can fill those slots, including Beirut that we just mentioned, including Rami if he were to be there. But you got Brandon Curry, you got Nick Walker. Who am I forgetting? Hang on.
I'll give it to you.
Hang on, from Brazil, Rafael. You got Rafael Brandao.
That's right. You've got Martin Fitzwater. You've got Tony O'Burton. Yep.
Tonio's going to have a tough time in that crew, but Martin is a real interesting read, because I just talked about this the other day. It's interesting because everybody's doing their Olympia predictions, the early predictions right now, like that we do.
That's right.
Right, and you're hearing a lot of people saying, I think. It's going to be this. Nick's going to be in the top 3. Nick can be Mr. Olympia. Nick, listen, man, you're selling Nick short. I don't know. You just don't like Nick. It's all this kind of stuff. It's just kind of funny to me. But
yeah, you've been getting that for years now. Yeah.
But here's the funny part, right? How do you talk about Nick as a front runner or a possible winner of top 3, but not one person has mentioned Martin Fitzwater, who arguably should have beaten Nick at the New York Pro? Now, whether you like Nick or whether you like Martin, and I was there in the front row, I had Martin winning. Okay, and it's not because I don't like Nick. So stop saying that you're just jealous of Nick. Jealous? Listen, I had my time. Okay, we're not jealous. I don't even barely even know Nick. Right? He seems like a nice kid. Right? He's a damn good bodybuilder. I'm going by purely what I right. Listen, he doesn't have the best shape, symmetry, and proportion. Funny. I'm sorry. Okay, I think those things should count. That said, they were neck and neck. Right? They literally could have gone either way. I think everybody would agree with that. But not one person. Not one has mentioned Fitzwater in the same conversation as Nick when it comes to the Olympia. And I find that kind of interesting, because it's like, well, wait a minute here. If this guy could have beat him in New York, then he might have a chance to beat him at the Olympia, right? So you almost have to bring up Fitzwater into that group then and go, he's got a legitimate shot to be. I don't think he can be in the top 3 or 4. I think he can be maybe 5 or 6, but he's going to be battling, William Bonac, like I said, Raphael. Akeem Williams, if Akeem could get his back in shape in terms of skin thickness, that guy from the side, Akeem, he can stand with anybody on this earth. His side shots are as impressive as anybody up there, including whoever's Mr. Olympia. But something gets lost.
Well, Akeem was top 6. He was top 6 in 2018.
I think he's a little underrated. I think if he can just dial it down a hair, he might have to sacrifice a little bit to get that back, where the back's got more detail. But if he can do that, man, he's very underrated, I think.
No, we'll see what Chris Aceto can do with them. One of the questions that I have around Samson is, when you look at all the other athletes out there right now, Hadi, Derek, Nick, even Martin, throw Martin in there, Akeem, all these Beirut won't make it, I don't think. But the thing with Samson is the only one that I've seen right now that has a little bit more uncertainty in his camp when it comes to the changes in his team in the past little bit here. Like his and I mentioned it on a podcast I did here recently. His prep coach being Marlenka, well, she is one constant. That's good. But he has somebody from Merrick Health that's doing his protocols, apparently helping with those protocols. I don't know who this individual is. I don't know what his experience is when it comes to protocols as compared to everybody else. It's because of that I am leaning more towards Samson being outside that top 3 because yes, Marlenka has experience. Who is this other individual? I have no idea.
Right.
Can he dial in the top guy in the world, one of the top 3 guys in the world? I don't know. So for that reason, I'm putting Samson as of right now outside my top 3. I don't know if they'll hit their peak.
If he doesn't reinvent the wheel, okay, protocols, this and that, everybody knows what we're talking about. He doesn't have to reinvent the wheel, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right? If he doesn't do that, he doesn't need a major overhaul. This guy's top 3 in the world, right? Listen, he ain't far off from being Mr. Olympia. Again, his only issue, he ain't missing nothing, except for conditioning. Again, against those guys,
right?
And it's all against who you're standing next to, right? Listen, this guy looks like freaking Hercules when he's walking around. Great physique, beautiful physique.
Sure.
But against those guys, he can't give up 10% in terms of they're that much better than he is in conditioning. He just can't do it. So that's his goal, as it should be. If he doesn't just completely change everything, and which usually, you're exactly right, results in a disaster. I every year I hear the same thing. I talk to athletes at BOM at a show, and I go, "Hey man, what happened?" And they go, "Well, we decided to try something new." Wait a minute.
Why?
You thought that the Olympia was the time to try something you've never done before? Like, are you insane? Like, what in God's green earth were you thinking? That you were right there. You were one of the front runners, right? You were a favorite going, and you decided now is a good time to venture in the uncharted. Well, we decided to carve up with sweet potatoes. Have you ever used sweet potato? No, never. It's like, oh my God. Like, okay. So I'm hoping Samson, and he's a very smart guy. I hope he only has to do one thing. He's got to dial it down just a hair. And I gave him the best. I already gave him the key, right? I gave the blueprint to the Olympia last year in an interview that we did. I says, "Do you want to be Mr. Olympia?" He says, "Of course." I says, "Then you got to do one thing." He says, "What's that?" I says, "Don't be 330 pounds." Right? And he kind of laughed because he knew what I was talking about, right? Listen, he's a big boy and he gets big in the off season. He's not like he's totally out of shape. He's still in good shape. But the problem is when you go up that high and you keep dialing it down, you think you're in shape at 280 something. Right? I mean, because listen, you've come so far down, and I'm seeing lines I haven't seen. I'm seeing that. The problem is he starts up here and he comes to here. The problem is he needs to be here. So, and that's why I told him, I says, "You want to be Mr. Olympia? Don't go over 300 pounds. Keep yourself lean. Get that. Let's try to get that skin a little bit thinner. I mean, it's going to hold less fat. Cells, water, so water and fat cells go hand in hand. If you're just a little, you were already the biggest guy on stage. You don't have to worry about that. You were killing these guys. You were towering over them. So that's not a thing that you need to worry about. So don't be 300 pounds. And I mean that, I'd say that tongue in cheek, but I mean it from the bottom of my heart, bro. Just be leaner. If you were, I'm just making up stuff, 280 last year, then come in at 275. Yeah. And if you do that and it results in what I think it would, you're looking at the new Mr. Olympia. They can't touch him when it comes to overall appearance because of his size, shape, structure, so on and so on. So, and Jack isn't far behind. I got news for you, man. He's gonna break some hearts over there. There's gonna be a guy or two that he's gonna bump down that list. And I hate to harp on Nick because again, it sounds like I don't like him, but he's gonna have a difficult time this year, I think, in retaining up into that, top 3. I don't even think to me it would be a very good on his part, but he's going to have a tough time, especially with the emergence of Andrew Jack and the improvements he's made. But he doesn't have the height. Not that the other guys are, the Derek and Hadi are giants, but, he doesn't have the shape. He's long-waisted and a little and short-legged. He's blocky from the front. He doesn't have a lot of flare in his thighs from the front. From the back, he's phenomenal. Arms are phenomenal. Again, we're talking Olympia here. So, yes, people, we are being a little harsh because it's the best bodybuilders in the world. But that's going to be a lot to overcome. So, as always, I wish him the best because I think the kid's a hell of a talent. And I like his no-hold-bars personality. We could use more of those.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing is we get the personalities, more so with the social media aspect. But one thing's for sure, this Olympia is going to tell an entire tale of how we may see this play out in the 2025 season, because we have seen drastic improvements from guys like Andrew Jack. We're seeing drastic improvements as of right now from Samson Dauda, Hunter Labrada, the shape, symmetry, proportions, as well as these taller guys filling out those massive frames with that insane conditioning in tight midsections. I don't think has ever been more emphasized or more actually shown on stage in bodybuilding than it has been this year, more so than the last, I would probably say almost 8 to 10 years even. You know, it's really, really exciting right now in professional bodybuilding on that Olympia.
And you just mentioned Hunter, who we didn't even mention in that conversation.
That's right.
And he's an absolute guy that will be in that, to me, fighting for that, 5, 6, 7, 8 slot. We'll see him this week, actually tomorrow, isn't it? The Italy show, I believe.
Yes, I believe it is. Yeah. And, it looks like he's got that one all sewn up. So we'll see him at the Olympia. But listen, Bob, I don't want to take up any more of your time here. I do appreciate you coming on. And like I said, I think that we did have a little bit of a different conversation than I've seen out there. When in regard of some of these things of the athletes rep and, the business of bodybuilding in particular. I really appreciate you coming on, and we'll look at doing it again, maybe after the Olympia, and see where it takes us.
Sounds good, man. If you ever got any questions, just ask, and drop me a check in the mail, for being the athletes rep. I appreciate it.
That's not my check to cut, Bob. I got a lot of checks I got to cut, Bob, but the athletes rep check ain't one of them.
Hey, good luck to you, brother. I appreciate you, man. Thank you, bro.
All right. Thanks, man.